A good multiple vitamin. Number one, because the food ain't the way it used to be. You've got to have a good multiple vitamin with your basic nutrients, your A, B, C, all of that kind of stuff in there, and your minerals, okay? Number one, that's the core to go along with this. Number two, B complex. And B complexes given 2 to 3 times per day actually is an anticonvulsant. And you think, a simple B complex? Yes, found to be as effective as some of the drugs that are out there, and I won't mention them, that are being handed out and being told that there's very few side effects. That isn't the case either. So if you are recommended these certain types of classifications of drugs used for seizures, research them and look up the side effects, and if you do experience any of those, be very mindful to let your doctor know about that. Some of those reactions to medications can be deadly on some of these seizure medications. I was researching it for my friend, and there's one drug that can cause, if you get a rash all over your body, severe, it can actually kill you. And so you can anaphylactically react to these drugs pretty heavily. They have a higher incident rate of anywhere from 1 to 5%. So you have to be aware that that's out there as well. Natural vitamin E can reduce seizures by 50%. Natural. Not the kind you get in your regular grocery store or drugstore. A natural vitamin E. 50%. If you were a neurologist, don't you think you should be recommending that? I do. I do. Magnesium citrate is an anticonvulsant in combination with B6. It helps with taurine uptake to the brain. Remember, magnesium is also a vasorelaxer. It prevents some of those spasms that go on in the blood vessels themselves. Calcium citrate in combination with magnesium is a sedative. You know how calcium is very calming. There's calcium lactates, which are also milk calciums, which are very calming to the body. And in combination with magnesium, they're very sedating. Folic acid, and a lot of people, particularly that are on these anticonvulsant medications, it stops or limits the utilization of folic acid. Being aware of that, contemplate supplementation or a good multiple that has extra folic acid. Trace minerals. If you're drinking purified water, start adding some trace minerals to your water. Absolutely paramount in order to maintain proper electrical connection. Ester C maintains vascular health. Vitamin A deficiencies. Vitamin A, you don't think of it in terms of protecting the brain, but it's extremely protective of the brain. And here in the United States, we have a lot of kids that are vitamin A deficient. Ralph has discussed that before on the studies he's listed. So if you're looking here, most of the items I'm pointing out here are all nutrients and nutrient deficiencies no longer found in our food and no longer available readily in our food anyway. We almost have to supplement with them. Taurine on an empty stomach, the amino acid we talked about. Dimethylglycine, the oxygenation of tissues. Oxygenating, oxygen, and so when I see those CO2 levels, I always tell people you need to bring your oxygen levels up. Let's eat more greens, vitamin E. There are lots of supplements out there that you can do, and exercise, of course, novel idea, also raises your oxygen uptake. L-carnitine, once again, is depleted by anticonvulsant drugs. So when you're depleting L-carnitine, now L-carnitine is very important for energy in the cells themselves, to the brain and to the heart and to every living cell you have in your body. So if you're carnitine deficient caused by these anticonvulsant drugs, you're not going to feel so good. And as a matter of fact, I wonder if that wouldn't cause somebody to convulse more. So being aware, that's something else you need to add to your little list if you're on those anticonvulsant drugs. CoQ10 aids the oxygenation. CoQ10 for so many different things as far as anti-aging, but oxygenation, once again, when you're talking about people who have seizures, we need good oxygenation going into the body. Very few times do I see people who are, that tend to have seizures that are very physically active. It's not as common. And very rarely do I talk about herbs too much, but these herbs just came out like lightning bolt fire. And there's a doctor by the name of Dr. Christopher that did quite a bit of research on these particular herbs for the nervous system and the central nervous system. And they're very helpful as anticonvulsants and getting the body to where it just modulates in its nervous system. I know black cohosh and some of these other things are used for other things, but for some reason, this combination of herbs, or one, and what they basically recommended was you rotate them, can be very helpful in supporting the anticonvulsant. Most of the time, the doctors don't have much information about this type of supplementation, so I would do a lot of research on myself, and then maybe if you'd like a copy, you can come by the store, any of the vitamin herb stores, and I'll give you a copy of this so that you can maybe discuss it with your doctor and do further research for yourself. I took quite a bit of time. We're going to be moving on directly to the research portion of our show. I thought this was important enough to address the specifics. Thank you very much. Welcome to the research portion of our show, and with us today with some good information is Ralph Turchiano. Ralph?
Thank you for that intro. Well, with the advent of diabetes and the fact that a lot of people have it, and next probably 5 to 10 years, most people will have it, it's time to look at a few supplements that may actually help prevent it. Ironically, one that's been demonized quite often that seems to have a positive effect in stopping it is coffee. As released in the bi-weekly Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry, the scientists said that past studies have suggested that the regular coffee drinking may reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. They discovered that coffee consumption prevented the development of high blood sugar and also improved insulin sensitivity in animals, thereby reducing the risks of diabetes. Coffee also caused a cascade of other beneficial changes in the fatty liver and inflammatory adipocytokines related to reduced diabetes risk. Now keep in mind, when they're talking coffee, they are talking straight coffee. Not coffee with ice cream in it, not coffee with tons of sugar and cream in it, just basically your black, straight coffee. So, if something that diabetes is a concern, it may ironically be something to consider. After that, those of you with diabetes that have type 2 diabetes, I should say, that are tough to control. Well, in the Endocrine Society's 92nd annual meeting in San Diego, they came up, or I should say discovered, something very interesting about diabetics that have tough to control diabetes. 91% of type 2 diabetics that have problems controlling the blood sugar are deficient in vitamin D, an amazingly high number. But they discovered an inverse relationship between vitamin D intake and the ability to control blood sugars itself. And again, this was from the Endocrine Society's 92nd annual meeting. They said, quote unquote, despite receiving regular primary care visits before referral to the endocrine clinics, 91% of the patients either had a vitamin D deficiency or insufficiency. So some of you diabetics out there may want to consider in regards to vitamin D, as opposed to a host of whole other ailments. Now, as we come towards allergy season, there's an interesting thing you may want to consider, and it comes back down to pine bark once again. And this was in the Phytotherapy Research Journal on June 14th. They conducted a study, and the study was approved by the Ethical Committee as well as Health Canada authorities. They did a study on pycnogenol itself. They gave one 50 milligram pycnogenol tablet and or one placebo twice a day. Again, there's only a 50 milligram pycnogenol tablet or a placebo twice a day. What they discovered was this, and then they exposed them, I should take that back. Then they exposed them to an allergen called birch pollen. They noticed that the immunoglobulin E, or some of the compounds, I should say, that rise in response to allergens, basically were 31.9% higher in the placebo group and only 19.4% higher in the pycnogenol group after exposure to the allergen. But what was more impressive, and I want to go this quote unquote, as detailed analysis showed, pycnogenol was more effective the earlier patients began taking the product prior to exposure to the birch pollen. The researchers speculate that a lag time of at least 5 weeks prior to pollen exposure is required for pycnogenol to defy hay fever symptoms. Subjects taking pycnogenol for 7 weeks before the onset of the birch season required very little non-prescription antihistamine. Only 12.5% of them required it compared to the placebo group, where 50% required non-prescription drug antihistamines. Pretty strong and powerful reduction in those allergy symptoms from something simple. But again, the earlier you take it, the better. All right, now we go to cancer, prostate cancer, and basically a slew of other cancers. Comes back down to polyphenols in red wine and green tea. And they put the title on the article, not I, say halt prostate cancer growth. And this was from the Federation of American Societies of Experimental Biology. They said in what could lead to a major advance in treatment of prostate cancer. Scientists know exactly now why polyphenols in red wine and green tea inhibit the cancer growth. To get a little technical, they said it blocks what's called SPHK-1/SB1-based signaling pathways, which play a role in prostate cancer. But it also plays a role in other cancers such as colon, breast, and gastric cancers. So something to think about in regards to polyphenols from red wine and, again, green tea. They also said when they took the human cancer cells and they implanted them in animals, results showed, in their words, a dramatic decrease in tumor size in the mice drinking either the green tea or the red wine. They said, quote unquote, the profound impact that the antioxidants in red wine and green tea have on our bodies is more than anyone could have imagined 25 years ago, Wiseman added, who's the researcher. As long as they are taken in moderation, all signs show that red wine and green tea may be ranked among the most potent health foods we know. A very good study from the Federation of American Societies of Experimental Biology, just released recently. And now, how would you like to be able to decrease your lung cancer risk by 50%? Even so, maybe 66% if you are a smoker or a non-smoker. Well, as they quote, I should say the June 16th issue of the Journal of American Medical Association, or JAMA, they said, quote unquote, that higher levels of B6, common amino acid, associated with lower risk of lung cancer. They said previous deficiencies in B vitamins had shown to increase the probability of DNA or subsequent gene mutations. They also added that deficiencies in B vitamins have been shown to be high in many Western populations. So what they looked at was over 400,000 people. And I should say close to 400,000 blood samples. And they said, to disease and onset are associated with reduction of at least 50% on the risk of developing lung cancer. Just regards to your B6 levels, the ones with the highest levels of B6 had a 50% reduction in lung cancer. In addition to this, when they added the amino acid L-methionine, it reduced their chance of lung cancer down by 66%. Pretty amazing cancer reduction risk from some two very simple, inexpensive supplements. Well, I'll leave it at that since we're running short on time, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ralph. We appreciate it. Thank you again for joining our show. Research for yourself. Thanks again.